Hello nerds and nerdettes, welcome back to the channel where once again we have a new video for you guys, which this video will be dedicated to my top 5 most slept on series or books in my collection that I feel like do not get the attention they deserve. Before we get into any of that, I do want to apologize to you guys for not putting out a video on Wednesday. I ended up being a lot more sick than I thought I was. On Monday, Tuesday night, pretty much lost my voice, even now kind of struggling, but like I said before, the show must go on, so I'm trying to pump out content for you guys, so just bear with me here. But we can jump into that list now, but beforehand, of course, if you're looking for any of these books, or any of the books that I've reviewed, head on over to the channel sponsor, organicpricebooks.com. Use the discount code STAYNERDY for $2 off your order to not only get a discount, but also help support the channel and the guys at Organic Price Books. I will very much appreciate that. But without further ado, we can jump into the list in no specific order of books that I just feel like are 100% slept on or just not talked about enough. Starting with number 5, which is going to be The Dark Knight Master Race, the trilogy of the Dark Knight Returns series, if you will. I hear more than enough talking about The Dark Knight Returns. Usually that is the main book that most people reference as Frank Miller's magnum opus pertaining to his, I guess, credentials on the character of Batman. But I actually, which may very well be a hot take, prefer Master Race over Dark Knight Returns or The Dark Knight Strikes Again, definitely. More so because of the fact that the villain that does kind of come up in this is one that I find a lot more intriguing, the idea behind it. Also, the main huge reason is that it is not so much a Batman story as it is a Batman and Superman story. There is a minor Superman love letter throughout the story if you focus deeply on the writing and the story itself. Frank Miller being pretty much a known person that is not a huge fan of the character of Superman, I feel like kind of apologizes in a way to the character of Superman and really showing his importance to not just the world, but just the DC Universe, Batman, and characters alike that really look up to him as not just a hero that all the other heroes kind of strive to be, but also the leader that they look up to as well. I think the threat level throughout this book pertaining to the villains, obviously I'm navigating to avoid spoilers here, is much more threatening, especially pertaining to Batman. Batman very much outgunned in this entire book, especially once you kind of learn what the Master Race is kind of pertaining to. Obviously, you have Klaus Janson, Frank Miller, still kind of doing their thing pertaining to art and writing, so it's very much a very similar vibe. I don't think it has that aesthetic that all of us loved so much from The Dark Knight Returns. It has a essence of it, but not in the exact aesthetic as The Dark Knight Returns, but still feels very much similar yet different at the same time. Very much updated, very much modernized. It doesn't feel the slight datedness that you do feel from The Dark Knight Returns doesn't exist here. Very much enjoyed it. I always went into comics, or when I first got into comics and started reading these stories, I always thought Dark Knight Returns was going to be the magnum opus of Batman stories, especially pertaining to Frank Miller, but I did find myself loving the Master Race even more so. A little bit of a hot take there, but I don't think enough people talk about this book, recommend this book, or reference this book by any means, and I think it deserves a lot more attention than it gets. And coming in at number 4 is Supreme Power by J. Michael Straczynski and art by Gary Frank. This is actually put out by Marvel in their Max line, which is a little bit more adult-oriented, pertaining to a lot of blood and gore, sexual themes, kind of just its contents in totality. Um, Such a great story. Does not get a lot of attention because it being a somewhat based off of or a re-modernization of Squadron Supreme, which is already a little bit of an obscure title that not a lot of comic readers even dabble in, but this is 100% worth the read. I truly believe that there's a little bit of something for everyone in this book, in this series. You have government espionage, drama, you have mystery elements, you have murder mystery elements, you have social elements, you have absolutely everything taking place here. A lot of characters, due to their morals, their ethics, their way of thinking, that truly are thought provoking in the way that they go about things. Obviously, a lot of these characters being based off of DC superheroes, such as Hyperion being very similar to Superman, Power Princess to Wonder Woman, Nighthawk to Batman, etc., etc. It's essentially a much more adult Justice League book, from them being first established to them finally forming a team. Very much enjoyable. I probably was reading this when I shouldn't have as a kid, but it is still just as good reading it as an adult. It's only really collected in the hardcovers and I believe two deluxe editions. Other than that, it's been fairly neglected, like a lot of Max titles, but such a great read. The characters in it are truly one of a kind, and I think J. Michael Straczynski very much fleshed out each character beyond belief and took them so far away from himself and made them into their own entities, their own people, which is so impressive as a writer. And then obviously you have Gary Frank on art duties, absolutely knocking it out of the park with his comic booky yet realistic kind of take on things. But it's brutal, it's sexy, it's mysterious, it's absolutely amazing. I cannot recommend it enough. This was one of my first pickups when I first started collecting because I remembered loving it so much, and I highly recommend you guys checking it out, especially for the few of you guys that I'm sure are out there that are fans of Squadron Supreme. This is going to be those same characters, just kind of modernized and revamped, a little bit of edge added, and it is really good stuff. But that does wrap up this book, so we'll move to number 3, which will be Kick-Ass by Mark Miller and John Romita Jr. Sorry, guys. I feel like I've said on this channel before that I'm not a huge fan of John Romita Jr., especially when he adopted that kind of blockier style, but it works so well in this series of Kick-Ass, following essentially nerds like you and I that decide one day to become real-life superheroes. There has been 2 movies based off the series. There are 3, well, I guess 4 books in the series if you're counting the Hit Girl 2.5 book. But it is, once again, everything you could ask for. There's action, there's mystery, there's twists and turns, there's blood and gore, there's nudity, there's sexual themes. It's not for children by any means, and it is so much better than the movie. The movie I did enjoy, but something about the way the characters are handled in this comic book, or the comic book version, and especially pertaining to the character of Big Daddy, it is absolutely magnificent. I have read this multiple times now. I've enjoyed every time I've read it. There's just something about the blood and gore and the realism to kind of this story that's taking place, and the relatability to these characters and the things they say. I mean, it can give you actual belly laugh during some dialogue scenes, so it even has comedy. But again, I don't see Kick-Ass any of the volumes in a lot of people's collections. I don't see a lot of people reviewing it or talking about it. I feel like it's been somewhat brushed over since the movie came out, but definitely read it if you haven't. If you have liked the movie, definitely read it. And if you just kind of like grounded, edgy, bloody, just stories that really have a good um, sense of direction and also sense of scale. In this case, the lack of scale here just kind of taking place on ground level. It's definitely a breath of fresh air. But please check that out. Very easy reads, not long reads by any means, and such a blast. But we'll head to number two. Which number two is going to be Hulk by Jeff Loeb and Ed McGuinness. This is out of print, unfortunately, but I very rarely hear anybody talking about this omnibus, and when I do, it's usually negative. You hear about Peter David, Peter David, Peter David, but I don't hear anybody talk about this, and it is such a blast of an omnibus. This is Hulk on the simplest of levels. This is Hulk that's going to be smashing. This is the Hulk that's going to be fighting. But there are little elements as well, such as a murder mystery element taking place as well, a new character being introduced. You also have another level of mystery that kind of takes place as well. A lot of the Marvel Universe kind of appearing and playing a role during the story that's being told here, and it very much feels like a John Wick movie or a John Wick style of movie, but featuring the Hulk, where the main point is entertainment, action, fighting, but it also happens to focus on the Hulk, and it is an absolute blast, especially to find out who this new character that I'm kind of referencing is, because it is a long-awaited face-to-face fight that probably both characters have been wishing for decades at this point, and it's absolutely awesome. I don't hear very many people reviewing, talking about, or even mentioning this. It could be because it's out of print, but like I said, the times I do, I think people are usually crapping on it, and honestly, I don't think every comic book needs to be highbrow. If you want to read that highbrow, more focused on the Hulk's mental, then obviously read that Peter David run, but this is comic book goodness. This is Green Hulk at his best, just throwing haymakers, punching, shedding blood, really just going at it with the villain at hand, and it is absolutely awesome. And the new character that gets introduced is awesome as well. So definitely recommend it, especially if you just want to take a quick break from those thought-provoking highbrow style of stories. Then definitely check out this omnibus, because I don't think very many people have, and it's honestly a shame. This was coming out in single issues when I was collecting, and I loved it then. I love it now, and the only person I've heard talk highly about it is Omni Nation, so shout out to him. But this is definitely worth the read. So that does wrap up number two, and we'll head to number one, which is going to be yet another series I haven't heard really anything about, or anybody even talk about even remotely, which is going to be Justice League by Scott Snyder. Majority of the art in here done by Jorge Jimenez. Top tier writing and art as far as I'm concerned. But this is such a slept on Justice League run. I cannot recommend it enough. I think if you enjoy comic books for what they are, and you really want the back to kind of that status quo style of comic books, especially pertaining to DC, this is the run that does that. This brings us back to kind of that JLA style of storytelling and team roster involving Martian Manhunter, Hawkgirl, Superman, Batman, John Stewart, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and we have crazy stories taking place here involving new lantern rings, stories that are taking us to the source wall again and investigating that, stories that have us fighting fifth dimensional beings, you name it, it takes place in here. It's far-fetched, crazy comic book goodness, and it finally makes the Justice League feel like superheroes again that are completing the impossible, and I absolutely loved it. I felt like it we were getting a lot of the same pertaining to a lot of DC heroes, honestly, and even Justice League books. Very grounded, very much grounded in reality, even if it does kind of go a little bit sci-fi or whatever it may be. But this run absolutely goes away with that, does away with it, and goes full tilt all the way to 10 and takes our heroes to absolutely crazy superhero levels where they are fighting to save not just the Earth, not just the universe, but dimensions, and it is an absolute blast. It's also a great team book because you get a lot of times where every character has a little bit of time to shine, which is always very essential in team books in general. You have Martian Manhunter love taking place, a lot of Superman love, Batman, Hawkgirl, you name it, they get some time to shine. And all of it is illustrated by the amazing Jorge Jimenez, which obviously speaks for itself. The dude just knows how to draw comic books. But again, don't hear enough people talk about it, don't hear enough people review it, and I 100% think it needs more attention because it is such a blast. Especially, I mean, the three level or the multiple sun, three generational punch from Superman. If you've read it, you probably know what I'm talking about. Is chill inducing and worth reading the run alone. Just wait until you get there. I mean, you there's no way you don't get chills reading it. But please check it out. I promise you it's worth the read, especially if you like, some really good DC superhero feeling stories that are just kind of feeling like the old days, the pre-Flashpoint kind of stories and feelings to these characters. And to me, that was the peak of DC, so I absolutely loved this run. But that does wrap up our list. So thank you so much for watching. Comment down below what I should add to this list. I know this list is probably could go to 100. There's so many slept on titles that I just don't hear anybody talk about, but I feel like it was about time I made a video about some of the books that I absolutely love and I hear nobody talk about. But I do want to hear from you guys, so comment down below what books you do love that nobody talks about and what I should be reading that you do love, because I love to hear from you guys and I love, love, love reading recommendations. Obviously, no way I can read everything, but when I'm perusing the shelf looking for that next book to read, could very well be your favorite book. But without further ado, or without an outro, clearly still sick, if you have not joined the Illuminati, hit that subscribe button to join the community. It is such an amazing place full of amazing people. We are really trying to get the channel to 1K subs. We are very stagnant at that 699. But if you could do me a favor, hit that thumbs up icon. It really helps us in the algorithm and will then in turn help us reach that goal of 1K subs. Also, if you did like this video or you like the channel, then hit that bell icon. That way you can get notified anytime I put out content. Promised you, if you're a newcomer, I do pump out more content than this. I've just been sick back to back for whatever reason, but we will get back to normal. And I apologize to those of you that have been watching. Sorry for not pumping out that video, but thank you for watching, and of course, stay nerdy.